But first, let's begin in Iran as tensions remain high over key sticking points in the peace negotiations between Iran and the United States. U.S. President Donald Trump said that just moments ago, talks will resume in Islamabad tomorrow afternoon. A major focus of those talks is likely to be the Strait of Hormuz. Iran closed the critical waterway once again yesterday, accusing the United States of violating ceasefire terms. The move came after Trump said the American naval blockade of the route would stay in force until a deal is finalized. Both Iran and the U.S. have signaled progress in peace talks recently, but the two sides are far apart on issues like the strait. The ceasefire with Iran is slated to expire this Wednesday. The CBC's Tom Perry is tracking the latest developments for us on this story from Jerusalem. Tom, there have been some conflicting signals from both sides over the last few days. Where do things stand as of right now when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, as of right now, we just saw U.S. President Donald Trump once again post on Truth Social, his social media platform. I'm going to read you some of what the U.S. president has said. He said that Iran decided to fire bullets yesterday in the Strait of Hormuz, a total violation of our ceasefire agreement. Many of them were aimed at a French ship and a freighter from the United Kingdom. That wasn't nice, was it? We've heard, in fact, that two ships did come under fire in the Strait of Hormuz, but both were Indian vessels. So I'm not sure what he's saying with this French ship and United Kingdom ship. Trump goes on to say, my representatives are going to Islamabad, Pakistan. They'll be there tomorrow evening for negotiations. So the U.S. president signaling there that negotiations could be getting back underway. We were wondering when that would happen. He goes on to say, this is a long post that he put up, but he goes on to say that we're offering a very fair and reasonable deal. And I hope they take it, because if they don't, the United States is going to knock out every single power plant and every single bridge in Iran. And this is all in caps. He says, no more, Mr. Nice Guy. So that's the latest message coming from the U.S. president. And I guess in terms of where we are right now, well, we had the Iranian government on Friday say that the Strait of Hormuz was going to open completely. And we heard Donald Trump confirming that. Since then, Trump had said that the naval blockade, the U.S. naval blockade, was going to stay in place. That's on ships going in and out of Iran. And now we've heard from the Iranians today saying that the Strait of Hormuz is going to be closing. So it seems right now that talks on ending this war, may be starting up again soon, at least according to this latest post from Donald Trump.
As you mentioned, things have been changing, including how much they've changed since Friday. And at that time, Iran tied the brief reopening of the strait to the ceasefire in Lebanon. So what's happening with that ceasefire?
Well, there is a ceasefire in Lebanon, but there's still fighting between the IDF and Hezbollah. The IDF says that one of its soldiers was killed on Friday in southern Lebanon. 9 others were injured. And it said as well that it's been launching air raids and artillery strikes going after Hezbollah targets. So the fact is, while the ceasefire is in place, there is still fighting going on in Lebanon. So we don't really know how that's going to end. And we don't know at this point how the conflict between the U.S. and Iran is going to come to some conclusion.
Much for this, Tom. The CBC's Tom Perry in Jerusalem this morning. And for more on the latest developments from the Strait of Hormuz, we're now joined by Brian Clark. He is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute and an expert in naval operations, military competitions, and wargaming. Thanks so much for talking to us this morning.
My pleasure, Marianne. Great to be here.
And as we've been talking about throughout the morning, Iran has resumed those restrictions on the passage through the strait as the U.S. blockade continues. What is the benefit for Iran to keep it closed?
Well, the benefit to Iran is it's a way of continuing to exert pressure and to highlight for the world the value or the capability it has to throttle the world economy. Because right now, I think Iranian government officials think they have the upper hand in these negotiations because they do control the strait. They've been resilient against U.S. and Israeli attacks. So at this point, they hold most of the cards in the negotiation. And I think what they're trying to do is pressure the international community into convincing the United States to relent on its blockade and come to the table with a set of concessions that the Iranians are looking for.
At this point, though, how optimistic is it looking? There is so much uncertainty on both sides, but how realistic is it that there could be a deal reached once the talks continue tomorrow?
I think it's unlikely there's going to be a final agreement. I could see there potentially being an agreement to extend the current ceasefire if the U.S. is willing to back off on some of its efforts in the blockade, because the U.S. Said this weekend that they would be intensifying the blockade and actually extending it to Iranian oil that's already been sent overseas to customers, for example, in China. So by continuing to tighten the blockade, they think they're putting pressure on Iran, but in reality, that doesn't really put that much pressure on Iran. Iran can withstand that, and I think what they're hoping to get is the United States to withdraw that blockade a little bit so that they can resume exports.
There is pressure from both sides to remove their blockades. We saw the post from President Donald Trump this morning. He says, no more Mr. Nice Guy. How likely is it that the strait will reopen before a deal is brokered, if that was to happen this week?
I think that's unlikely. I think the Iranians are going to want to continue to control access to the strait until they get a final agreement with the United States and Israel regarding who manages the strait and if there's any income to be gained via tolls or other sources of income, where that money might go. So I think they're going to want now that to be an element of the final agreement, which I think is going to cause it to be extended for probably several weeks, if not months, before you get a final resolution of this conflict.
President Trump saying that they're going there with a fair and reasonable deal. What do you think that would look like?
I think from the U.S. perspective, they think fair and reasonable is sort of tacitly allowing the Iranians to continue their development of ballistic missiles, their continued support to proxies in the region, relief on sanctions that are currently on Iranian exports of oil, and then freeing up frozen assets that are currently being held overseas. So I think those are things the U.S. is willing to give up. I think there's still disagreement on the nuclear program, where the U.S. wants to have some kind of reduction in the program to as a face-saving measure so that they can show that they had accomplished something by this war. And the Iranians don't want to give up the nuclear program. So I think that's an area of disagreement. And I think the biggest area of disagreement is who's controlling the strait and to what degree that results in an income stream to Iran.
Even if the blockades are removed, can you talk to us about the ongoing concerns for the vessels that would be passing through the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, for vessels that are not going to be willing to accede to the Iranian demands for tolls and to pass through the Iranian-controlled part of the strait, they risk being attacked. So unless the U.S. is willing to defend those ships with its own ships, then shipping companies will be reticent to use the strait without Iranian approval. Then the downside is, if you do that, then you're potentially going to be interdicted by U.S. naval forces at the blockade. So if you're a shipping company, there's really no good answer. You're pretty much stuck waiting until this conflict is resolved.
And that waiting game continues. Of course, it is unclear when it will reopen for a reasonable amount of time anyway, since we've seen how much things have changed since Friday. But there's been so much global impact on the fact that it's been closed. Are there any other viable alternatives to this waterway if it's not open soon?
Not really. There's some pipelines that circumvent you go around the Strait of Hormuz. Those don't provide, they only provide a fraction of the current oil exports. So you'd have to expand those over time, which would take years of infrastructure development. The other alternative is trucking it out of the region, which again is a long-term prospect that's going to take a lot of money and probably take years to develop the infrastructure to support that. So there's really not a good alternative at this point. I think the most likely alternative, if there is an impasse, is the U.S. will have to start escorting shipping through the part of the strait that it's going to control and defend it against Iranian attacks. That seems to be what the U.S. is sort of working on as its plan B.
In the meantime, let's see what the plan A is once those negotiations resume tomorrow. All eyes will be on that. In the meantime, though, Brian Clark, thank you so much for your time and for your insight this morning.
Thank you, Marianne.